bet you it would be a day that lots of kids would definitely show up for, wouldn't it? I mean, you could imagine how much talk there'd be on the playground about this. So, what do you think? Should naked education be taught in schools to aid body positivity? That's what the purpose of the show is about, they tell us. We're joined by a relationship coach, a mum of 2 boys, Fahima Mohammed, who says this could cause psychological harm.
And writer, a mum of 2 girls, Tineke Bernard, who says it would show children that we all come in different shapes and sizes. Tineke, do we need to see naked bodies in a classroom just to know that human beings come in different shapes and sizes?
I think so, yeah. I think it's really naive for us to think that at that age, these children haven't already Googled and had a search online or just seen things on television that gives them one very narrow idea of what bodies look like. And the chances are it's not going to be what their bodies look like. And that can lead, in my opinion, to them having problems with their own self-image and their own body image. So being in a controlled situation where we can show them that bodies come in different shapes and sizes and that, you know, everyone's not asymmetrical, we don't all look the same, is really important.
But why do they have to be completely naked for that? Why couldn't they just be in maybe their underpants? Why do they have to get your genitalia out?
Because it's the genitalia. Out? Those are the areas that are going to differ from person to person. So if they think that all boobs look one way because that's what they've seen when they've, you know, Googled it, or they think they're all going to look like the Barbie doll, then they're going to, without showing that to them, how are they going to know? And it's not about sexualising these things, you know. If we're only teaching them in, you know, sex ed, it's the only time we talk about those parts of their bodies, how are they ever going to know that, you know, they're there for nurturing or, you know, they're there for other purposes and they're totally normal?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Is there anything wrong with that? You know, very often sex education in school uses drawings, doesn't it? Yes. Pencil drawings that are based on, you know, well, look like a doll, essentially. What's wrong with seeing the reality of the human body?
Well, not everybody is prepared and ready for it. And again, we're discussing this from an adult's point of view and studying and knowing child, you know, behaviour and sort of like their mental state from all ages. They're not necessarily all in the same spectrum to actually understand this and be ready and prepared. And psychologically, it can actually cause some sort of like neural processing in the brain where they're not actually going to have the sort of the impact of having some sort of like positive sexual stimuli, and that's the study so far. So at the end of the day, we need to look at it from their perspective. And if you want to educate children, if you're going to show naked bodies, I think it's going to actually deter from the actual education as well, to a certain extent. I work with children, I am in schools, I hear what they're about, and I hear to what their stories are. And not everybody's even comfortable with the, you know, immediate and the ordinary sort of RSC education in the first place. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have that, but I think talking more about less negative talk, healthy nutrition, and you don't need to undress and, you know, somebody in order to address the situation or some sort of issue.
It's the kind of reality of it, I think, that's quite shocking, and how it would be handled. You know, a stranger in a matter of metres, you know, away from a child, an under 18-year-old, they're teenagers we're talking about, they're not tiny, but they're still young, naked, when we have so much going on, where we're trying to make people conscious of appropriateness and inappropriateness, it becomes quite a moral confusion, I think, and I pity the poor head teacher that would have to navigate it.
I'm sure there'll be lots of parents in uproar too, but I do think that we're not talking about 6-year-olds, we're talking about kids that have a certain age who they're probably already having these conversations in their groups of friends, they're already seeing these things on television, so we're actually giving them a controlled place where there are, you know, it's a controlled situation where they're going to have these conversations and they're going to be able to ask those questions in a safe space.
I mean, there are extraordinary statistics, aren't there, Fahima, of how many youngsters access very, very adult material. I'm trying to use the appropriate language for the hour of the day.
Of course.
And have been exposed to it in very early teens. So it's not as though you're able to control the environment in which they see nakedness anyway.
But just because they are exposed to it, we should not normalise it, and we should know the difference and we should know the boundaries. And at the end of the day, I think that we are, you know, desensitizing certain things which actually can have an impact on their sexual behaviour and patterns in the future. And again, this is research and studies which we're not looking into, and we're not looking at it from an actual...
What would be your fear, then? What would be the sort of thing that it would trigger?
It shows that actually it does trigger some sort of like anxiety, depression, and actually it can have negative consequences. Yes.
How does it trigger anxiety and depression? So you're seeing a
the
naked
neural
body.
development of the brain. So when it's exposed early to nudity, it does have an impact on certain children, as much as they are at a certain age where you think they are exposed. But all children, they develop, you know, even within that year, in a very different way, even between boys and girls. They might be able to handle it slightly different. I've got 2 boys, and even having a conversation with them, they're like, well, Mum, this might even show some of our friends taking it as a joke, and they might even expose themselves because we're showing it in school and it's allowed. So it can trigger. But these are children saying it. These are children saying it themselves, that's what it can lead to.
But that's not all children. I understand what you're saying.
No, but the problem is
both sides.
when you generalise something, I think that's your point.
Yeah.
That would be the challenge, wouldn't it? When you generalise something...
I don't think they're going to start having bad behaviour because they understand that boobs come in different shapes or that bodies look differently. I think it's more likely to give them self-confidence to realise that they have autonomy over their bodies and that bodies look different ways. And I doubt that because I sometimes, you know, if I'm at home, I might be half-dressed. And my kids aren't going to be like, oh, my gosh, well, I hope not, that they're now going to need therapy because they've seen their mum walking around in a T-shirt.
They might actually look at that and say, well, I don't even want to be like that. It can still have the negative effect.
That's
so it's
fine.
not to say that. And we're saying it from our point of view as adults, having grown, having the experience, where these children do not have that yet. We don't have that same sort of mindset as what they do, and we are exposing them at a very, very young age.
Could it encourage youngsters to expose themselves because they've had authority approval of that kind of thing?
I don't think, no, not in the same way that giving them sex education isn't going to make them run out and have sex. I don't think seeing a naked body is going to make them decide to strip off and start running around the school naked or start flashing strangers. I think it's taking one thing and putting it in a very different situation to win an argument. I don't see the correlation at all. You know, maybe there are studies out there that show that, and I'll happily read them, but as far as I'm concerned, we're giving them autonomy over their bodies, we're giving them confidence. That can't be a bad thing. We're not living in, you know, Victorian era. This is 2023. There's nothing wrong with children understanding. We're not talking young children here, we're talking teenagers, understanding what bodies look like.
Well, children at that age are not necessarily that understanding. Even the prefrontal cortex of judgment and even decision-making is only fully developed at the age of very early 20s. So we need to understand a lot about neural development in children and understand their way of seeing the world, and we always portraying and projecting as adults onto young minds, which can be more detrimental.
OK, well, look, Channel 4 have been in touch with us. It's their show. It's called Naked Education, and they say it's a body-positive educational programme for all ages that aims to normalise all body types, as you were saying. All the teenagers who participated did so with appropriate consent. They and their guardians were fully prepared to take part in the item about body taboos, and they all had support throughout. All of the life models in the show were thoroughly background checked before being cleared to take part. So they've done a big due process. I guess it's how that then would be rolled out, isn't it?